Sarkeesian. At this point, I'm almost 100% convinced that if I were to attend a major video game event, literally any event, whether it be E3, PAX, Consumer Electronics Show, or even their relevance challenged brethren, the Tokyo Game Show, that by simply walking into a group of random nerds and loudly shouting the name Sarkeesian, I could instantly spawn a riot that'd make Rodney King reflexively shit his pants. 5 years ago, this woman wouldn't have taken up space in the comments section of a gaming news article, let alone the body text. And yet in 2014, thanks to sites like Kotaku and Destructoid lending this woman appalling quantities of unwarranted relevance, she's inexplicably become the cause célèbre of entirely too many gamers and self-appointed social activists, okay? Look, I don't even think this rant really needs to be about feminism. So it won't be, because the issue isn't feminism any longer, and that's perhaps Anita Sarkeesian's greatest sin. So abhorrently slipshod has been her research, so outlandishly inarticulate has been her message, that the question is no longer even, are video games sexist? Which, for the record, I believe is a topic that warrants at least exploration and analysis. But no, the question now is, how is this being remotely construed as journalism? And let's not gloss over that sin either, because it's major, okay? There are people, most of whom with which I vehemently disagree for the record, but good people nevertheless, who have devoted their entire adult lives to the principle of advancing the feminist cause through the delicate waltz of activism and debate informed by a deeply held personal conviction. Which is why when a half-wit slattern sock puppet like Anita Sarkeesian jetés across the dance floor, breakdancing to fucking Chopin, everyone gets up in arms, often without expressly knowing why. And let's not be obtuse here. The simple fact is, in the same way that a broken clock is right twice per day, the woman occasionally has a valid fucking point. Was, for example, Lara Croft founded on the idea of objectifying a completely one-note female protagonist long enough to sell 13-year-old boys on a by-the-numbers 3D adventure game? No, she wasn't. That's why Crystal Dynamics invested hundreds of thousands of dollars rounding off the jaggy PS1 polygons in an effort to make Lara's breasts more round in Tomb Raider 3. Of course there's sexism in video games, people. I mean, of course it's exploitative. It just isn't everywhere in video games. And this only deepens Anita Sarkeesian's just earth-rending ignorance. Equipped with only the most superficial pseudo-facts and the most cursory understanding of the subject in question, the woman fumbles her way through a poorly worded, mal-researched parody of journalism, her incompetence ultimately serving only to swell the size of both her eternally growing chorus of detractors and of her supporters, each one more informed by knee-jerk prejudice than the last. And as both grow, so too does the chiclet-brained feedback loop of her own undeserved importance. And yes, it's absolutely true that elements of the woman's detractorship comprise something of a hive mind. Actually, that isn't true, because the word hive mind implies that many of these pants-shitting imbecilia on 4chan actually possess a fucking mind. But for every one of the witless mob that dons their pitchfork, torch, bib overalls ensemble the merest utterance of the surname Sarkeesian, there's an equally knee-jerk cavalry of self-styled white knights leaping to the defense of a damsel in distress, who incidentally has nothing but contempt for the very concept of a damsel in distress. The result is a cavernous divide, the size and scope of which we haven't seen since Jonah Hill last yawned in public. The imperative, from my perspective, is simple: that everyone, supporters and opponents of feminism alike, must come to understand that regardless of where we may individually fall on the subject of feminism, Anita Sarkeesian must go the fuck away. At her absolute best, she's a hapless and inarticulate spokeswoman of ideas much larger than her narrow field of both intellect and expertise will allow. If you want to argue that the woman is unwittingly calling attention to larger issues, I can readily concede that fact, but I'd add that every time she stumbles through yet another half-wit harangue on feminist frequency, she also mischaracterizes and misrepresents your entire movement. Feminists should want Anita Sarkeesian to take the red eye out of this debate for the same reason universal healthcare advocates should oppose Obamacare, because it's such a chest-slapping, ham-fisted perversion of the concept's original intent being marketed and sold by a spokesperson with motherfucking hamstrings of clay that allowing it to persist within the debate will only do further damage to the very people who put it forward to begin with. I'm Razorfist. Godspeed.